All right. This will truly be a masterpiece, I hope. Forge gang! I am still a hard man. Let's go. How are you all doing today? Hope that you guys are all having a wonderful time. I'm just going to make sure that the stream is actually working right fast. I've been waiting a good amount of time for this one. And it is going to be fun for me. Just make sure that we're streaming. Hopefully everything is good. I just want this to work out. This is going to be a very fun topic to get into. Life in Celtic Christian Ireland. This will be life in Celtic Christian Ireland. Let's see here. No. Okay. Hopefully this is public and other people can see this. I'm just going to make sure right fast. And if there's any bandwidth issues or whatnot. Okay, it looks like it is public. All right, so Forge gang, I am still a hard man. Let's go. All right, nobody's coming in the chat, so I'm going to make sure that I'm live. All right, so I'll be talking today about Celtic culture, Christian monastic culture, and if we have time to actually do it, I'll even talk about the Vikings in Ireland. Yeah, I know that it's kind of rather late for the Vikings, but I want to go ahead and talk about them as well. In the Irish medieval chronicles, they're referred to as the Danes, I believe. The Danes. So anyways, make sure that I'm live. Yeah, it looks like we are live. All right, so without further ado, I want to talk about some of the facets of early Christian Ireland. I'm going to talk a lot about Irish culture. So if you have a cup of Guinness by your side, drink it and enjoy. Drink your Guinness, Patty. We're talking about Celtic Christian Ireland. If you don't have a cup of Guinness or a drink of Guinness or just any Irish beverage on hand, then I truly feel sorry for you, for you're in poor spirits. All right, so I am Imperator of Forge. This is life in Celtic Christian Ireland. When I was doing life in ancient Celtic times, I mentioned that I would do a video on Ireland. And I may even do one on Scotland. I'm not for sure yet. So, once Christianity made its way into Ireland, it more or less very quickly converted. Of course, there was pagan resistance and there was stuff like that that happened. And the Vikings were also pagans when they came to Ireland too. First, I want to talk about the Gaelic Christian culture of Ireland. So, explore all facets of life in Celtic Ireland. The Celts were a major power in Europe before the dawn of Christianity. At the height of their power, the Celts established themselves across Europe, naming major cities such as Paris, Milan, and Vienna in the process. They were people who were to be feared all over the world and conquered many places and fought many battles. Celtic refers to people descended from one of the current Celtic regions in the western extremities of Europe, and each of these regions has retained much of its indigenous culture and distinctive language throughout the centuries. Life in Celtic Ireland was immensely different than any other culture as well. In the beginning, in the early stages of the Iron Age period, a new culture started to evolve around Europe. This new culture was known as the Celtic culture, and its influence made its way to Ireland through trade and travel. With the coming of the Anglo-Saxons, most of the Celts who lived in Britain fled to Ireland. Well, actually, they went to Wales and Scotland, but in time, Ireland became a major center of Celtic culture. Ireland had new cities, and the people were divided into clans that lived in small villages. Most of them farmed and raised cattle. Nature of the Celts. The Celts were essentially warriors and great farmers who came to Ireland from Eastern Europe. The historian Siculus said, the Celts are terrifying in appearance. They are tall, with moist white flesh. Their hair is blonde. They wear vivid clothes, tunics dyed in every color. They are boasters and threateners. The Celts lived in ring forts, hill forts, promontory forts, and crannogs. Ring forts consisted of a circular bank of earth surrounded by a trench. Inside the trench were houses built of wood and thatched roof. Many ring forts contained an underground passage called a Cyuterian. Hill forts with ring forts built on top of hills, which offered a great protection to inhabitants. For example, the hill of Tara. Similarly, promontory forts like Dun Aengus were built on cliff tops for additional security. Crannogs were built on an island in the middle of a lake for also, you guessed it, protection. This made the Celts feel more at ease from potential invaders and wild animals. The Celts divided Ireland into 150 kingdoms called tuath. Each tuath had a king. Language and communication. The Celts had a basic type of alphabet called Ogheim, where they cut a series of notches into the edge of a standing stone. There is a collection of Ogheim stones at UCC, University College Cork. Celts' appearance. Generally, the Celts had a rigid appearance. The Celts actually took great care of their appearance. They bleached their hair blonde using lime wash. Men often spiked it to make themselves frightening. They also shaved their beards, but kept their mustaches, and they kept it long. Amidst all of that, jewelry was popular among the Celts. They wore necklaces called torques. The Broiter hoard is a collection of gold Celtic objects found near Limavady, County Derry. Men and women alike wore a long woolen cloak called a brat. This cloak was tied at the neck with a brooch or a pin. Poorer Celtic men wore trousers under their brat called bratcock. Under the same brat, women wore a tunic to their neck to their ankles. Celtic warriors limed their hair and made it stand up, and pulled it back to the nape of their neck. This was probably a battle tactic to make themselves look frightening to the enemy. They painted themselves with a blue coat called woad. Both men and women were heavily tattooed. They also beat their swords and spears against their leather shields, creating an awful sound meant to scare the enemy. Celtic society. The Celtic people reach out to us through the mist of time. Out of the depths of the Dark Ages throughout Europe and in the lands of the British Isles, tales are told of people who had closeness to nature. They are painted as being gentle and kind, living in harmony with others around them, having no real written language of their own. Others were left to tell their tale. Some of these tell of a different nature of these people. To these people, a king or chief was in charge. Farmers were part of the lower class in Celtic society. Despite their reputation as being barbaric, they were quite skilled in metalworking and made fine jewelry from gold, silver, copper, and bronze. True, the Celts loved to fight. Warriors would even fight for the best piece of meat, called the hero's portion. On a completely another hand, the Celts loved poetry. The poet was a very respected member of the society. Their marriage traditions were simple but full of allusions to mysticism, much like the current Irish wedding traditions. Warriors. Since most men in the Celtic society grew up on the doctrine of war and fighting for the sake of the nation, other occupations didn't matter that much at the time. Yes, being a merchant or a sailor was essential in the Celtic society, but no prestigious and high regard has the one looked at if one is a soldier. Several commentators at the time, particularly Caesar, have mentioned that the Gauls were essentially mad warriors. War was like a cult to them that was centered on individual warriors. They tried to prove their individual worth by killing as many people as possible. A Greek historian, Diodorus, wrote of the Celtic tribes who were threatening the Mediterranean civilizations at his time. Their aspect is terrifying. They are very tall in stature, with rippling muscles underneath their clear white skin. The Celtic way of fighting was alarming. Most of the warriors armed themselves with the weapons nature has given them. They used to go half naked into battle, painting crimson blood on their bodies and faces. Clearly, they were fearsome warriors, but the Celts only fought when necessary, and they sometimes held strong to their humane beliefs. Women. Among the Celtic peoples, women had a very important and distinctive role from those in other contemporary societies. For example, they had property, which they couldn't do in other societies. They could initiate a divorce and were accepted as warriors, and they were really, really tough in warfare. It is indeed a special role for Celtic women. Goddesses were equal, and that was not the case in other religions. There is not a lot of evidence pointing to women warriors among the Celts, alas. Queen Boudica led an army against the Romans around 60 AD. Celtic women were not to be messed with. The Celts were seafaring people too. They made boats called coracles, by stretching cowhides over a wooden frame. Some caracals were large enough to hold as many as 30 people. The boats handled well at sea and were used for travel, trade, and fishing. The Celts were able to remain free of Germanic attacks because their island was located further out in the Atlantic Ocean than Britain. Scholars, artists, merchants, and monks from different parts of Europe came to Ireland because of its peace and safety. Celtic religion. The Celts were pagan and they believed in many gods. The Celtic priests were called Druids. They wore white linen tunics and offered animal sacrifices to the gods. Irish scholars and artists were influenced by Christianity. The Irish Church was founded by St. Patrick, born in Britain in 400 AD. St. Patrick was kidnapped when he was young and taken to Ireland by Irish pirates. Later, he escaped to Europe where he studied to be a priest. After becoming a bishop, he returned to Ireland and converted people to Christianity. He spread his message all through the island and set up many new churches. Ireland was in contact with Rome during the Germanic invasion of the Roman Empire. This meant that the Pope could no longer lead the Irish Church. So the church turned to its abbots. Many were related to the heads of different clans, and each clan supported its own monastery. The monasteries became centers of Irish life, although many were in places that are not accessible like rocky coasts or steep hills. Most monasteries were made up of a group of huts with a wooden stockade around them. Some monasteries were built of stone because of poor transportation and communication. Church organization was weak, so each monastery took charge of its own affairs. More on Celtic religion. Irish monks soon began to follow different practices than those of the Roman Church. They wore their hair in a different way and celebrated Easter on a different day. The rituals were not the same as those of the Romans. Moreover, Irish monasteries set down few rules. A monk was free to move from one monastery to another. Many monks have the choice to be hermits, as long as they still follow the manners and convictions of the church. Becoming a missionary is not obligatory, as it was when someone reaches a certain age. Additionally, many schools were set up around the country. One of the best known monks was Saint Columba. He set up a monastery on Iona, an island off the west coast of Scotland. From his base on Iona, Saint Columba did missionary work among the many non-Christian Celts along the coast. Monks from Iona went to northern England to preach to the Anglo-Saxons. Other Irish monks went to northern Europe, where they built monasteries and churches. Many Irish scholars became part of Charlemagne's palace school. They helped spread Christianity and learning throughout the empire, that is, the Carolingians. Where did the Celts come from? While much has been written on the arrival of the Danes, Angles, Saxons, and Normans to the British Isles, few have explored the origins of the people who occupied the land before them. Just where did the Celts come from? After the decline of the Roman Empire around 410 AD, After the decline of the Roman Empire around 410 AD, the Angles and Saxons began moving from mainland Europe and settling all across England and lower parts of Scotland. By the 9th century, the Danes started building settlements around the British Isles, and in the early part of the 11th century, in 1066, the Normans invaded England. Long before all of this, the Celts were living in the British Isles. They had arrived centuries before even the Romans were established in Europe. If you visit the British Isles today, you may well come across a Celtic revival, as the national curriculum in Wales requires all students to learn the Welsh language. This ancient language is a branch of the wider Celtic languages spoken along the western isles of Scotland, Ireland, Cornwall, and Brittany. More on where the Celts came from. Historians have traditionally seen the Celts as just another Germanic tribe that migrated west from Central Europe. But a relatively new scientific study has found genealogical evidence to the contrary. Dr. Mark Joblig from the Department of Genetics at the University of Leicester published a journal on the Y chromosomal lineage of the Celts. In this journal, the lineage of European male Y chromosomes was tested and analyzed with DNA evidence strongly supporting the theory that Celtic men spread from a single source from the Near East, or the Middle East as it is more commonly called. What is fascinating about the findings in this journal is that the route in which the migration occurred is entirely mappable, moving through Turkey across Europe and in particular around the Mediterranean coastline and the Iberian Peninsula, through the Gibraltar Straits and up along the coast of Western Europe into the British Isles, is a clearly defined path. The increase in frequency and reduction in diversity from east to west of the Y chromosome supports a rapid expansion. As a fading trail of the chromosome shows the path of migration of the Middle East to the region where the Celtic people reside today. The study estimates that the timeline of the expansion was approximately over a period of 4,500 years, and this likely happened from 7,000 BCE until as recently as 2,500 BCE. But regardless of the accuracy of their dating methods, the migration did occur, and there is a corroborating historical document that we would like to cross-examine with the scientific research, which may suggest a more recent data for this migration. Extraordinary facts about life in Celtic Ireland. Celtic history is steeped in mystery. We don't know much about the Celts, because they haven't left behind many written records, but they were sure quick to fight and conquer. Still, from some historians, we were able to gain information about the history of the Celts and some of their everyday traditions and customs. So let's delve into that. The Romans had nothing on their roads. While Romans often get credited for being the road builders of Europe, there's substantial evidence to suggest that the Celts beat them to a punch. Not that the history books would ever tell you that, because as we all know, history is written by the winners. And for the bulk of early recorded history, the winners resided in the Roman Empire. When you're the biggest, toughest guy on the block, you can take what you want, including credit for things others have done. And according to some, that includes the building of roads. Evidently, archaeological proofs now suggest that it was the Celts and not the Romans who were the first to build roads. Remnants of these roads would seem to indicate that they were constructed before the Roman conquest reached the British Isles. These roads were constructed largely out of wood, which was carbon dated to the Iron Age, an indication that they predated the Roman Empire expanding far north. And speaking of the Iron Age, the Celts were among the first to utilize iron weaponry. One aspect of Celtic culture almost everyone is undoubtedly aware of is their reputation as fierce warriors. They were also technologically ahead of their time, which gave them a pretty giant leg up. After all, this is the group that invented the exact chainmail that was later adopted by the famous Roman legions. That obviously flies in the face of old rumors that the Celts fought naked, since we can't imagine chainmail could feel particularly great clinging against your bottom part. But it wasn't just superior armor that gave the Celts an advantage in battle. It was superior arms as well. The Celts are believed to be among the very first to forge iron into swords, replacing the flimsier bronze swords most had been using up until someone around 800 BC, up until sometime around 800 BC. They also began to utilize smaller, lighter swords and daggers, also made of iron around 600 BC. These were far less cumbersome than broadswords, enabling the Celts to be more agile and quicker to strike on the battlefield. The Celts were insanely wealthy. While his history often points the Celts in broad strokes as being somewhat barbaric, savage warriors, that's not exactly the case. Sure, they did participate in some acts of barbarism, and many practiced ritual human sacrifice. And yes, we're going to get to that in just a bit. But that aside, they were also massively wealthy, thanks in large part to being highly active in trade of the time. Being among the first to utilize iron certainly helped fill their coffers as well. Gold was so abundant among the Celtic religions that they used it in their armor, weaponry, and art. Silver and bronze were also widely used, and they became renowned for their finely crafted ornate jewelry. Their artistry was among the best in the world at that time, and their scientific and technological prowess was a big part of that. Through their art, their wine, their vast quantities of gold, and their advancements in technology, the Celts were able to line their pockets very nicely indeed. The Celts had progressive views on gender and sexuality. I'm not for sure I really care to read all of that. Man, this is long. While we can't exactly call the Celts progressive in terms of their views on slavery, they were pretty much into the whole thing like any another colonial entity at that time. We absolutely can when it comes to women and sexuality. Now, don't get us wrong, even in a somewhat progressive tribal society, it was still patriarchal. But that doesn't mean women didn't have a say or couldn't rise to power, or even become warriors or dignitaries. In fact, quite the opposite is true. Particularly before the Roman conquest, Celtic women could lead tribes, as was the case with Boudica. Obviously, Boudica represents far from the norm, what was one of a few Celtic women to rise to power and lead her people before her death in 60 AD. She was the queen of her tribe and led her warriors to battle against the Roman Empire. And speaking of gender and sexuality, one element of Celtic culture that became widely believed is that not only could women hold positions of power, but that Celtic men often preferred the company of other men. It was commonplace for men to seek out sexual companionship with their fellow male warriors, and likewise, women practiced free love in Celtic culture according to historical records. They were not savages, but they did hunt heads. As we've mentioned a few times at this point, the Celts were far from the barbarian history has often pointed them to be. They were an advanced society, took great care and pride in their appearance, and were wise enough to know it was an affront to wine connoisseurs everywhere to water the stuff down like those simpletons in the Greek and Roman empires. But that doesn't mean they didn't practice in at least a few practices that might qualify as barbaric and violent. Chief among these practices, other than ritualistic human sacrifices, which we'll get back to shortly, was head hunting. As with ritualistic sacrifices, Celtic head hunting was driven by religion. For the most part, you see, the Celts believed that the head contained a warrior's soul. So by taking his head, you are in fact capturing that soul. At least that's one popular theory as to why they hunted heads, though the exact reason is not known, and likely varied from tribe to tribe and warrior to warrior, particularly since the practice continued even after most Celtic tribes had converted to Christianity. The number three had a huge significance. An instrumental of the Celtics' belief system was the concept of tripolicity. While that may sound like a kick-off family counseling website, in reality, it has to do with the number three, specifically things coming in the form of triplets, so to speak. That means three realms: sky, land, and sea, and three types of gods: personal, tribal, and spirits. Now, the Celts didn't just have three gods, mind you, they had many. When we talk about the Celts worshipping three types of gods, we're talking about the kinds that guide you when you are alone, the kinds that are with you when you're in groups, and those that protect your home. To put it simply, tripolicity refers to three things that come together to form a whole. It's an important part of cosmology and astrology, which were integral parts in Druid paganism. For most of their history, the Celts were polytheistic. Polytheistic. Eventually, some Celtic tribes adopted Christianity as their preferred spiritual path, but for the bulk of Celtic existence, they practiced polytheism, the worship of many gods. It's not unusual that they'd have worshipped numerous gods, considering the same was true of their contemporaries, the Romans and the Greeks, and the chief purveyors of Celtic polytheism or Celtic paganism were the Druids. Believe it or not, much of what we know of the Druids and Druidism comes from, of all people, Julius Caesar, Julius Caesar. Obviously, that's part of what renders our knowledge of the Druids information that would probably be taken with at least a small grain of salt, considering Caesar and his empire were frequently at war with the Celts. Still, Kaiser relayed that the Celts were teachers and priests, and also rendered judgment and penalties resulting from crimes and squabbles within their tribes. As alluded to in the previous entry, the stars played a significant role in the Celtic religion and Druidism. They also practiced ritual sacrifice to appease their gods with the burning of wicker men, sacrificial victim or victims inside, which will send a shiver down Nick Cage's spine should he read this and believed in reincarnation. The Celts, well, they weren't really Celts. Confused? Don't be. It's a lot simpler than the header probably makes it sound. You see, the group you think of as the Celts isn't really the Celts. At least not in the sense that Romans were the Romans or the Greeks were the Greeks. That's because the Celts weren't just one group. They consisted of many, including the aforementioned Gauls, the Britons, the Gauls, and the Galatians, among others. See, Celtic really referred to language and the somewhat similar dialects these various tribes used. That said, grouping all those tribes together under one umbrella, which again was done by contemporaries like the Greeks and Romans, since the Celts themselves did not keep written records, is probably misleading. Some historians suggest that the languages were different enough, and the groups so spread out as far as Turkey, all the way west to the Atlantic Ocean, that it's highly unlikely most of the tribes were remotely united. In fact, it's believed part of the reason they were ultimately defeated by the Romans was their lack of unification. In essence, calling a Gaul Celtic would be akin to calling a German European. Technically right, but highly generalized. Celtic folklore. Celtic folklore is full of creatures and beasts from different mythologies. Whether it's an actual legend or a passing myth, Irish people were and will always be huge believers in the mystic, and Celtic lore has some creatures that should be considered intriguing by any standards. The Knuckle Avi. Legends tell of a creature beneath the northern sea, a demon with one red eye that burns like a flame in the depth, and breath so foul that it can wilt crops, poison livestock, and leave children cold and dead in their cribs. During the summer months, the myth of the sea keeps it trapped beneath the waves. But come winter, you must lock your doors and mind the sea, lest you meet the Knuckleavy. The Knuckleavy is one of the most fearsome creatures in all Celtic folklore. The story comes from the Orkney Isles, where it's basically their equivalent of Satan. No one really knows what form it takes underwater, but on land, it's said to look like the torso of a man fused to a horse's back. It has no skin to hide its yellow bloated muscles and black throbbing veins, and its proportions are all wrong, with a fleshy 3 foot wide head that lolls uselessly atop its shoulders and arms so long its knuckles drag to the ground. The horse, half of the beast, breathes out a fetid black smoke that causes a disease called martashin that can pretty much kill anything, namely crops, livestock, and small children. If the knuckle catches a sight of you, it will pursue you relentlessly. Nothing but the vastness of the sea can contain it. In the past, people have been afraid of this creature, but they wouldn't even whisper its name. But there is one way to get away from it, has a demon of the sea. The Nekolivi can't tolerate fresh water. To escape the beast, you have only to cross a stream of running water, then it should leave you alone, at least for a little while. The Fomorians. Once, long ago, before man ever set foot on it, Ireland was a place for gods. Some of the first settlers were the tribe of the gods. They were beautiful, powerful, and well loved, but they weren't without their enemies. Some of their bitter rivals were the Fomorians, a giant grotesque race of seafaring monsters. Accounts of what they look like vary. Some say they're humanoid with goat heads. Others say they only have half a body, one arm, one eye, one leg, but most stories seem to indicate that they're all ugly and disfigured in their own unique ways, with a few exceptions. Like the Greek Titans, the Fomorians embody all the harsh, malevolent forces of our world. They're pretty much made to be the bad guys. Fortunately, they're not around anymore. Over time, they were forgotten, and the word Fomorian came to be used for pirate or sea raider. Hobbs. Not all Celtic folklore is about evil giants or demons of the sea. Some are actually quite nice. For instance, it was a pretty commonly held belief, especially around the Anglo-Scottish border, that there existed tiny, hairy, wise old men who would settle down around people's homes or barnyards and provide them with aid in the night. These creatures were known by many as Hobbs, Hob being short for hobgoblin, which may have meant goblin of the hearth. Generally, Hobbs were looked at as kindly, helpful spirits. If you treated them with respect, put a dish of cream or milk every night, and your little friend may stick around. But if you get stingy and forget to leave your treat, your hob may abandon you, or worse, he might turn into a poltergeist and cause all kind of mischief around your home. Interestingly, hobs have also been called naked goblins, mostly due to their strange aversion to human clothes. When given an article of clothing like, say, a sock, they usually get offended and leave. Changelings. Fairy tale creatures have always had an interesting relationship with mankind. One of the strangest and perhaps most disturbing relationship is that of humans and changelings. When a fake creature fell ill or was dying of old age, some stories say they'd be disguised with a special charm that made them look like a human infant. Then in the night, the fairies would steal a human baby from its crib and replace it with a look-alike. The fairies would go on to raise the baby as their own. while the human parents were left to grieve their slowly sickening child, or at least they thought what they thought were their child. As the fairy charm wore off, the hideous form of the changeling was revealed. Believe it or not, this was a comforting story to a lot of people. Before the advent of industrial medicine or pathology, the infant mortality rate around the world was quite a bit higher. The concept of changelings helped ease that pain. It allowed people to believe in a better alternative, that their child wasn't dead, just stolen, swapped at birth, perhaps living on, perhaps living out an enchanted life in the fairy realm. Although, to be perfectly honest, most variations of the story are pretty dark. It's easy nowadays to look at creatures like these and think that they're just weird, quirky tales that people made up to entertain themselves. And in some cases, that's probably true. But you have to remember that a huge number of people actually believed in these things. These were the stories they used to make the harsh, unfair world they lived in feel like a little more just. Celtic homes. The Celts are famous for their all-around style of roundhouses. Roundhouses are very unique for Europe, and yet the Celts in the British Isles and the Iberian Peninsulas built roundhouses extensively from the Bronze Age all the way up until the end of the Iron Age. In Scotland, they were still using roundhouses until the end of the Picts. It was a major fortification style that still existed in the Celtic society, even when it went out of fashion. You may ask, why didn't the Romans or other cultures use the same style? Why did they pick to the squarish or oblong structures? Well, it's mostly due to the existing influence of the early farmers and the cultures that already existed in Europe before the spread of the Indo-Europeans. So consequently, the Celts were the less influenced by the architecture of that group of people. Celtic games. There is literary and archaeological evidence that sheds a light on the fact that the practice of playing with board games was an immensely popular and culturally significant phenomenon among the Celtic-speaking peoples of Britain and Ireland in the first millennium AD. Yet little attention has been given to the origin of such games in these islands. Writers of British history appear to have taken it for granted, or at least allowed that it was possible, that board games were a feature of ancient Celtic society from earliest times. The view presented here, however, is that board games arrived in Britain and Ireland through contact with the Roman world, and that they are part of the wider picture of cross-frontier material cultural interaction. More on Celtic games. Medieval literary sources from both Ireland and Wales make frequent mention of board games, the playing of which was clearly an important aspect of daily life among the elite, whose interests are reflected in the texts. Amongst several games recorded, special status is accorded to the game of Fidchel, Irish, and of Gawyd da Bewl, British. The British evidence is, in general, later and more meager than the Irish, and only general comments can be made regarding the nature of Gerwa de Bewl. The Irish evidence, however, is considerably more plentiful and detailed, and it is possible to deduce a number of features of Fidchel. Both games have been recognized by Celticists since the mid-19th century, though their significance has not been adequately probed. The forms as they appear in British are Welsh. Gerwer de Bewel equals Gedwid, wood plus Hewil, sense. In Irish Gaelic, the form is Fidchil equals Fid, wood, Shiel, intelligence. The parent form, though not directly attested, can be reconstructed as common Celtic Widdu Ilia, Widdu, wood, plus Kiwilia. The name, which is not based on any Roman game name, enshrines the principle that this was a game of skill played on a wooden board. Celtic food and drinks. Common foods and general diet are relatively straightforward to assess using archaeological analysis. Stable isotope analysis and traditional archaeological excavation techniques. In addition to food practices, archaeobotanical, and ceramic assemblages, the array of stone tools and ceramic objects found at a site from Celtic Iron Age sites spoke to the technology related to the production of alcoholic beverages. The high percentage of cooking pots sherds recovered suggest that soups and stews were common forays, not only in Mediterranean France, but throughout Celtic communities during the Iron Age. Among them, cooking dry meat from sheep and cows was the utmost provider of protein and energy for the Celtic communities. Alcohol consumption. The prominent role of alcoholic beverages in Celtic and Iron Age Europe, in place since at least the Bronze Age, has received much attention from scholars. Dr. Hans-Peter Sticka's results confirms that there was an emphasis on the importance of drink in Iron Age and Celtic cultures, that beer at least was being produced during this time in southwest Germany. The results also shed some light on the production process and some of the technology used in the production of alcoholic beverages, of which little is known. In general, evidence of beer, mead, and wine consumption has previously been recovered from burial mounds, shards, and classical bowls. However, mead and beer were considered the primary alcoholic beverages in Celtic society, though braggot, malt, and ale were also mentioned within historical text regarding Celtic drinking practices. Luxury food. The idea of luxury food in Celtic Iron Age Europe was likely different from that of Roman period Europe, as in Celtic cultures, alcoholic drink and large quantities of common food would have constituted the luxury factor, though not necessarily considered an exotic fare, excepting imported wines. Alcoholic beverages were certainly staples at feasting events. As stated above, alcoholic drinks such as beer or mead would have been prepared locally. Wine, on the other hand, was imported from Italy or France, and would have been expensive and therefore generally accessible only by higher class members of society. Celtic music. The history of Celtic music is multifaceted. There is the instrumental music tradition that flourished immensely during their time. Instruments like the flutes, the fiddle, the accordion, the concertina, And all these instruments arrived in Irish music at different times over the course of 200 or 300 years. In Ireland, it seems that music was chosen as one of the very important cultural centers. Celtic music is the music played by people who, in a sense, share the peoplehood of the Celts. And since the Celts founded most of the countries in Britain, their musical culture spread all over them, and thus began the Celtic music world. A lot of the songs were about their rich livelihood and continued the tradition to mention the Irish history all the way from its beginnings. Relatively, there is a saying in Ireland that goes, "Those in power write the history, and those who suffer write the songs." While focusing on contemporary music at that time, which concentrated on folklore music and ballads, the Celts also managed to sing about their reclamations and conquers. It was and still is a tradition that was in a constant state of growth. Celtic festivals and religious holidays. There are 8 special sacred days, holidays, and festivals in Ireland from the times when the old Celtic world stopped to celebrate. Christianity adopted many of their feast days to match the old Celtic traditions, and they range from joyous to downright scary. These were a huge part of life in Celtic Ireland. Beltane, Bealtaine, an ancient Gaelic festival ushering in the joy of summer blossoms across Ireland and Scotland. Parts of Europe and in Wiccan and pagan communities worldwide has Beltane. In the southern hemisphere, Wiccans and pagans mark Samhain. Beltane or Beltane is the anglicized spelling of Beltane or Beltanin, the Gaelic names for either the month of May or the festival that takes place on the first day of May. Centuries ago, bonfires were lit to welcome the arrival of summer. In Ireland, depending on what day the holiday falls on, the feast is marked as a public holiday. In towns around the country, May Day fairs are held where farmers and traders all gather in towns to sell their wares. Midsummer, summer solstice. Midsummer may simply refer to the period of time centered upon the summer solstice, but more often refers to specific European celebrations that accompany the actual solstice, or that take place around the 24th of June and the preceding evening. The exact dates vary between cultures. The summer solstice is marked in parts of Ireland by bonfires as well, like Bealtaine, on the side of the road. In rural Ireland, communities gather and for their local bonfire and celebrate the longest day of the year with song and dance. Luath-Nasa. Luath-Nasa was one of the 4 main festivals of the medieval Irish calendar. Imbolc at the beginning of February, Beltane on the 1st of May, Luath-Nasa in August, and Samhain in October. One early continental Celtic calendar was based on the lunar, solar, and vegetative cycles, so the actual calendar date in ancient times may have varied. Luath-Nasa marked the beginning of the harvest season, the ripening of first fruits, and was traditionally a time of community gatherings, market festivals, horse races, and reunions with distant family and friends. In Gaelic folklore, it was a time for hand fastings or trial marriages that would last a year and a day, which would then be renewed. Many celebrate the holiday today with reunions, bonfires, and dancing. autumnal equinox. Similar to the St. Patrick Day festival, the autumn-fall equinox celebrates when night and day are of equal duration and usually falls in the middle of fall, around September 21st, specifically when the tilt of the Earth's axis is inclined neither way, from north towards the sun being vertically above a point on the equator. The symbol of the sacred day is the cornucopia, has all the harvest is collected and the stocks for winter is hoped to be plentiful. Samhain. Samhain, from Irish Samhain, Scots Gaelic Samhain, Old Irish Samhain, summer's end, from Sam, summer, and Fuin, end, is a festival on the end of the harvest season in Gaelic and Brythonic cultures. Many scholars believe that it was the beginning of the Celtic year. This day falls between 2 days, Eyachi Samhana, October 31st, and La Na Marbith, November 1st. Eyachi Shahamna is Halloween, and La Na Marbetha is the Day of the Dead, or All Souls' Day, when those who have passed away are remembered. It marks the beginning of the darker half of the year as the winter approaches. Winter solstice. The winter solstice celebrates the shortest day of the year and, depending on the calendar, occurs between December 21st to December 23rd. Though the winter solstice lasts an instant, the term is also colloquially used like midwinter to refer to the full 24-hour period of the day on which it occurs. Annually, hundreds of people gather in Newgrange, County Meath, Ireland, to watch the sunrise magically illuminate the ancient burial site. Globally, interpretation of the event has varied from culture to culture, but most cultures have held a recognition of rebirth, involving holidays, festivals, gatherings, rituals, or other celebrations around that time. Imbolca. Imbolca is one of the 4 principal festivals of the Irish calendar, celebrated among Gaelic peoples and some other Celtic cultures, either at the beginning of February or at the first local signs of spring. The Irish Imbolc translates from the Old Irish Imbolg, or in the belly, a tribute to the early spring pregnancies of ewes. As lactation begins, an array of dairy foods eaten on this day symbolizes new beginnings. Corn dollies, fashioned like brigid, are made by young pagans, while adults twist brigid crosses. After dark, candles are lit to welcome the rebirth of the sun. St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's Day, Irish, La Feireála Pádraig, Ulster, Scots, St. Patrick's Day, is a religious holiday celebrated internationally on 17th March. It commemorates St. Patrick, who lived from 387 to 461, the most commonly recognized of the patron saints of Ireland, and the arrival of Christianity in Ireland. It is observed by the Catholic Church, the Anglican Communion, especially the Church of Ireland, the Eastern Orthodox Church, and Lutheran Church. St. Patrick's Day was made an official feast day in the early 17th century and has gradually become a secular celebration of Irish culture in general. The religious day is marked by a special mass for the feast, and traditionally everyone wears green. This is considered the middle of the spring season and is also referred to as the spring equinox. The fall of the Celtic Empire. By the year 300 BC, the Celts had lost their political cohesion, and the empire began breaking apart. Tribes began wandering in search of new lands. Some went to Greece, where they outraged their former allies at the sack of Delphi in 273 BC. Others renewed the war with Rome, in alliance with the Etruscans, and were defeated at Sentinum in 295 BC and Lake Vadimo in 283 BC. One of the great ironies of history is that the Romans, destroyers of the early Celts, were also the protectors of the later Celts. When the German tribes, including the Lombards, Goths, and Franks, attacked the Roman Empire, sweeping through Gaul to create the massive feudal states of the Middle Ages, they subjugated the earlier peoples, including the Celts. These lower classes would eventually mix with the German nobility, coming up with the peoples we know today as the French, Italians, Belgians, and Spanish. One group went into Asia Minor and founded Galatia in southeast Turkey, where a Celtic dialect was still spoken until 400 BC. These were eventually assimilated into Turkey, or more accurately its center. Others enlisted as mercenaries with Carthage. Wars between Celts and Germans or Celts, who had settled earlier, were fought all over mid-Europe, Gaul, and Britain. By the end of this, the only strongholds were Britain and Gaul. The beginning of the Christian era saw Britain under Roman rule. So, are there any thoughts about that? Any particular or interesting thoughts in chat? I don't, so I guess I'll continue. Early Christian Ireland. Early Christian and medieval Ireland. It is impossible to talk about the remains of early Christian structures without talking about their founders and how Christianity transformed the very landscape of Ireland. Megalithic tombs, stone circles, and standing stones were replaced as places of worship by wooden churches and monasteries. In fact, many pagan sites, such as sacred wells, were Christianized by associating them with a local saint, and many standing stones were converted into Oghine stones. Although there is evidence that Bull stones existed prior to the spread of Christianity, they are now mainly found at Christian sites. It is commonly believed that St. Patrick brought Christianity to Ireland, but there is evidence that Christianity was introduced prior to St. Patrick's arrival. Some of the first Christians coming to Ireland would most likely have arrived by sea directly from Gaul or through Wales, where earlier monks from Gaul set up in the 4th century. The most likely landing would have been along the south coast, and Christianity then spread to the north. A saint active in this area during the early 5th century was Saint Declan, St. Declan. St. Declan who founded a monastery in Ardmore, County Waterford. Irish Christians were sufficiently numerous by 431 to justify Pope Celestine's appointment of St. Palladius as Bishop of Ireland. A year earlier than St. Patrick is believed to have arrived in Ireland. Most of St. Patrick's missionary work appears to have taken place north of a line running from Galway to Wexford, and most of the churches acclaimed as founded by St. Patrick are situated in this half of the country. The earliest church government would have been episcopal in nature, with bishops of fixed sees exercising jurisdiction within a diocese. By the end of the 6th century, the new monasteries had ousted many of the older patrician foundations as the important centers of religion and learning. By the 8th century, Ireland became unique in Western Christianity in having its most important churches ruled by a monastic hierarchy led by abbots rather than bishops. In Britain and on the continent, they were led by archbishops. In Ireland, they were led by abbots. Although St. Inda's monastery in Inishmore in the Aran Islands schooled many of the first Irish abbots, it was soon eclipsed by the monastery of St. Finian at Clonard, which emphasized sacred study. So great was this school that St. Finian was known as the teacher of the saints of Ireland, and his students became the 12 apostles of Ireland. Each of the apostles founded their own monasteries. Colmkelly in Durrow, Derry and Iona, Cairan in Clonmacnoise, Brendan in Clonfert, Molaise on Divinish Island, Canis at Agabo, and Mobby in Glasnevin, to name a few. And so these are just some of the numerous monasteries that are still in the Republic of Ireland today. These are Irish pilgrimage sites. Ireland's pilgrimage routes. Just as the Camino de Santiago follows Santiago, St. James's route through Spain and France, numerous Irish saints lend their names and stories to Ireland's pilgrimage paths and routes. Meander the green fields, remote summits, vast heathland, and dramatic coastline while following ancient Ireland's pilgrimage routes. Motivations for hiking Ireland's pilgrimage routes may vary. Some pilgrimage hikers may be spiritually motivated. Others may be fascinated with the historical aspect, or even the importance of tradition, and the romantic notion that so many others have walked this path before. Others may choose to hike Ireland's pilgrimage routes in search of inner peace or mindfulness. Some hikers may simply like the idea of walking along a long-distance trail. Whatever it is that intrigues you, whether you're looking for inward reflection or simply a beautiful place to hike, Ireland's pilgrimage routes hold the answer. Read on to discover the best of ancient Ireland's pilgrimage routes traced across the land by the pilgrims of yesteryears through some of the most stunning corners of Ireland. Takar Pihadraig, St. Patrick's Way, County Mayo. Curwath Patrick, Ireland's most holy mountain, County Mayo. St. Kevin's Way, County Wicklow. Glen Call McKelly, Shilly Chol McKilly, County Donegal. Sleeve League, the Pilgrim's Path, County Donegal. Donegal. Crowson Na, Noamith, or the Saint's Way, Dingle Peninsula, County Kerry. Mount Brandon, Dingle Peninsula, County Curry. St. Finbarr's Way, County Cork. Mam Ian, County Galway. Connemara. So those are just a few examples of these ancient, actually these medieval pilgrimage sites. Anyways, is it going to load or not? Ireland Saints. During the Dark Ages, Ireland was known as the land of saints and scholars, a place of bargaining culture and Christianity. Here is a selection of Ireland's famous saints who helped spread light during dark times. St. Patrick. His feast day is 17th March. Ireland's most prominent patron saint, St. Patrick, is as much an integral figure in Irish culture as he is in the country's Christianity. Brought as a slave to Ireland from Wales in the 5th century, St. Patrick went on to convert the pagans of Ireland to Christianity. There are a great many legends surrounding St. Patrick, from great battles of miracles and magic against Druid priests on the hill of Tara, sprouting shamrocks to explain the Holy Trinity. Remember when I told you about the importance of the number 3 in Celtic mythology? He used that to explain the Trinity to the Irish. And of course, banishing all the snakes from Ireland. St. Patrick established his first cathedral at Armagh, and ever since Armagh has been the ecclesiastical capital of Ireland, and to this day is the principal seat of both the Catholic and Protestant archbishops of Ireland. St. Patrick is buried in Downpatrick, close to the site of his very first church at Saul, and is buried alongside Ireland's other patron saints, Brigid and Columba, in accordance with an ancient legend, and the 3 saints would be laid to rest together. St. Brendan, feast day 16th May. St. Brendan the Navigator was born in County Kerry, and according to legend sailed to the Americas sometime in the 5th century. One of Ireland's early saints, St. Brendan was born near Tralee in County Kerry, and was ordained by St. Erc around 512. St. Brendan established monastic settlements at the foot of Mount Brandon on the Dingle Peninsula, and in later years established his great monastery at Clonfert, County Galway, where he is interred. Amazing stories surround St. Brendan, most famously of his legendary voyage across the Atlantic in a leather caracal, along with 14 other monks in search of the Garden of Eden. It is believed by many that St. Brendan's voyage brought him to North America, a belief supported by theories that Christopher Columbus relied on the legends of St. Brendan for his voyage and even visited Brendan's monastery at Clonfert before heading across the Atlantic. Brendan's voyage was repeated in the 1970s by explorer Tom Severin, whose caracal boat is exhibited at Craigieannowin Castle in Galway. Brendan also visited Wales, England, and Scotland, and the cream liquor made in Northern Ireland from local whiskey and cream, St. Brendan's, is named after him. St. Brigid, feast day 1st February, one of Ireland's patron saints. St. Brigid was the daughter of a pagan king of Leinster and a Christian Pictish slave who had been baptized by St. Patrick. According to legend, St. Brigid prayed that her beauty be taken so that she could not marry and become a nun. Renowned for her generosity and care for the poor, St. Brigid famously converted a dying man by making up a cross with rushes she found on the ground to bless him with, something children in Ireland learn to make in school. St. Brigid established the convent of Kildare in County Kildare around 470 and founded a school of art here, which went on to produce the famous illuminated manuscript, the Book of Kildare, the Book of Kildare. St. Brigid is interred in Downpatrick along with St. Patrick and St. Columcille, Ireland's other patron saint. Ireland's other patron saints. St. Columba, Columcilla, feast day 9th June. St. Columba was born in County Donegal in the 5th century and was descended from great Irish nobility, tracing his ancestry to Niall of the Five Hostages, the legendary Irish High King. From his Irish name, Columcille is known as Dove of the Church, and the saint established his first church in Derry in the 6th century. While he was a monk, Saint Columba, the patron saint of bookbinders, wrote an illustrative book of Psalms while at the monastery of St. Finian. Both men then fell out over who owned the copy, the writer or the publisher, resulting in the Battle of Col Drimha in 561. The battle was a massacre on both sides, and the stalemate was concluded in favor of the publisher by the then High King, who declared to each calf its cow, effectively established the first copyright law. In remorse, Saint Columba vowed never to return to his native soil and set for Scotland to convert the Pictish pagans as penance for those who died in the battle. Saint Columba traveled the land before establishing his abbey on the Isle of Iona of the coast of Scotland. During his travels of the Highlands, it is said Saint Columba encountered the Loch Ness Monster. healing a local chieftain who had been attacked by Nessie and banishing the beast to the loch. Saint Columba is buried along with Ireland's other preeminent saints, Saint Patrick and Saint Brigid. Saint Kevin, feast day 3rd June. Saint Kevin was a hermit and a miracle worker. He was responsible for the monastery of Glendalough, County Wicklow, and according to legend lived to the age of 120. It is believed that St. Kevin was descended from a royal line of the Leinster kings, and from the age of 7 was educated by St. Petrock of Cornwall. He studied for the priesthood at 12, and after he was ordained lived as a hermit in a cave in Glendalough, a picturesque valley deep in the Wicklow Mountains. Ironically, for a hermit, St. Kevin established quite a following, and by the 9th century, Glendalough became one of the country's most important monasteries and one of Ireland's chief pilgrimages, and today is a popular attraction for those touring the Wicklow Mountains. And finally, St. Oliver Plunkett, feast day 1st July. More a political than a spiritual figure, Oliver Plunkett became a saint due to his martyrdom at the hands of the English during the 17th century. Born of Irish nobility at County Meath, Oliver Plunkett was educated in Rome, where he stayed during the many years of persecution for Catholics in Ireland under the penal laws. In 1669, he was appointed Archbishop of Armagh, primate of all Ireland, and returned to his native soil. Plunkett established a Jesuit school in Drogheda, and set about reorganizing the Catholic Church. However, following fresh persecution and an accusation of treason, Plunkett went into hiding. In 1679, Oliver Plunkett was arrested on false charges of treason. He was transferred to London for trial, and when the first trial was deemed a farce, he was returned, found guilty, and sentenced to be hung, drowned, and quartered. Oliver Plunkett was the last Catholic to die for his faith in England. He was beatified in 1920, the first of the Irish martyrs to be beatified, and later canonized in 1975, the first new Irish saint for almost 700 years. In many of Ireland's cities, you'll find streets named after Oliver Plunkett, along with Irish revolutionaries like Connolly and what was that revolutionary of the 1798 uprising? Tom Wolfe? No. Oh, Wolfe Tone. That's it, Wolfe Tone. So in a lot of Irish hamlets and towns and stuff, you'll find street names named after the saints that I just described, along with people like Theobald Wolfetone, who wasn't a saint, he was a revolutionary, the people that led the 1916 uprising in Dublin against the British. It was called the Easter Rising of 1916. There's even streets named after some US presidents like Woodrow Wilson and John F. Kennedy. And I think there's even a street named after George Washington, the founding father and first president of the United States. But obviously, overwhelmingly, it's going to be names after Irish saints of the Catholic Church, Irish revolutionaries and insurgents, and militants that fought British rule for 800 years, and like warriors and stuff like that of that sort. All right. I'm just kind of sorting out what I was going to say. So yeah, these are the saints of Ireland. Ireland is known as the land of saints and scholars due to the many saints and scholars it produced. When Christianity flourished among the Celts and Irish in Ireland, a monastic movement had been created. Churches and monasteries were being built around Ireland, creating not only places of worship, but also places of learning. Did you know that Ireland has hundreds of saints, some of which is celebrated around the world today? There is Saint Palladius, Saint Patrick, Saint Odrin, Saint Brigid of Keldor, Saint Finian, Saint Brendan, Saint Columba, Saint Inda, and Saint Oliver Plunkett. All right, so I'll go ahead and talk about some of the pilgrimage sites, the pilgrimage routes. And then I will probably go ahead and go to chat. So this is St. Tachar Prahadrag, or St. Patrick's Way, is Ireland's longest surviving pilgrimage way. At about 37 kilometers going back to ancient times. Once upon a time, this route followed the old royal road starting in Cruachan, a holy site that was once the seat of Ireland's bygone kings of Connacht, including the famous warrior Queen Meav, today located in County Roscommon in the Irish Midlands. The Tokar Pihadrag walks begins at the lovely Romanesque Balintudor Abbey, continuing westwards towards the wild Atlantic coast of Mayo. Along the way, we may spot holy whales and other early Christian remnants. The second half of the Tokar Fiadrag hike follows the country roads and farm tracks as we head westwards through County Mayo, one of Ireland's most rugged and remote counties. Though once one of Ireland's most popular pilgrimage walk, Tachar Pihadrag fell into decline in the 1500s, ceasing to be of use during Ireland's penal laws, a series of laws to impose the Anglican Church on the Catholics and dissenters. The route terminates at the foot of Cruag Patrick, Ireland's holy mountain and the crown jewel of the pilgrimage walk. Ireland's holy mountain, Cruag Patrick, County Mayo. Legend has it that St. Patrick banished all the snakes from Ireland from the summit of Cruag Patrick. For over 4,000 years, pilgrims have climbed to the top of the mountain of Cruag Patrick, not far from the cheerful coastal town of Westport, in search of splendid vistas, as well as connection to land, myth, and history. It was Hear that St. Patrick, one of Ireland's patron saints, is said to have fasted for 40 days in 441 AD. At the top of the mountain, there is still a shrine in his honor. Today, Croagh Patrick is popular with hikers from all walks of life, as it not only affords spectacular views, but also has strong historical connections to Ireland's patron saint. From the summit, the 365 islands of the glittering Clew Bay, once strongholds of adventurers and pirates, are clearly visible, and yet thousands flock to this mountain on Reek Sunday, the last Sunday of July, for a collective pilgrimage in Mass. Many take the pilgrimage so seriously that they do it barefoot. County Croagh Patrick on its own, are combined with the much longer Tolkar Fiadrag walk, see above for the multi-day pilgrimage walk, has a compromise for those who prefer to do a pilgrimage walk while still keeping your hike within 1 day. You can start the hike 5 kilometers east of Croagh Patrick at the Bohe Stone, also called St. Patrick's Chair, which is a unique piece of Neolithic art. Take care when climbing Croagh Patrick, particularly if you choose to hike the Pilgrim's Path, as the path has become eroded due to high traffic. If you prefer, there are a few other ways to hike the mountain that, while not pilgrimage routes, are far quieter and will still bring you to the summit and the shrine, such as from the western side. St. Kevin's Way, County Wicklow. St. Kevin chose one of the most inspiringly beautiful locations in Ireland to construct his hermitage in solitude. The twin lakes of Glendalough, caught between the soaring Wicklow Mountains, are internationally renowned for their stunning scenery. It was here, after 7 years of solitary contemplation, that St. Kevin established a monastic settlement, the ruins of which are the final destination for this dramatic pilgrimage route. An ancient pilgrimage route, this path is also one of the best ways to discover the magic of the Wicklow Mountains. Once an ancient center of education, St. Kevin's monastic center at Glendalough is now in ruins, but is a spectacular foray into Irish medieval history nonetheless. There are 2 starting points for this pilgrimage walk: Holywood, a place that has supposedly lent its name to California's Hollywood, and Valley Mount. Holywood is a more common starting point, but Valley Mount is quieter. Either way, if you start from either place, the first part of the walk will include some road walking, but the Valley Mount roads are generally quieter. The routes converge at Ballinagie Bridge, which is where the predominantly off-road part of the route begins before heading to the spectacular Wicklow Gap, the highest point on St. Kevin's Way, exceedingly scenic. It is also one of the highest Irish mountain passes served by a paved road. Dive in and out of forest, valley, and hills, past ancient pilgrimage flagstones before arriving at the stunning Glendalough monastic site. Though most of the original settlement is gone, many of the ancient structures date to 11th and 12th century, the peak of European pilgrimages. The valley and the monastery seem to fuse together as if created by a heavenly architect. Glencolmcilly, Shirley Coholmcilly, County Donegal. St. Columba, or in Irish, Colmcilly, meaning church dove, was an Irish abbot and missionary credited with spreading Christianity in what is today Scotland. Although he founded the important abbey on the Scottish Isle of Iona, he was born in Ireland's County Donegal. The area around Glencomakelly is interlaced with paths and Gaeltacht, Irish Gaeltacht, Irish-speaking communities, forming a sort of pilgrimage route paying homage to both Ireland's native language as well as an important piece of history, not to mention one of Ireland's most eminent saints. The Slieve Cumulacally is a 65-kilometer route connecting the rural communities of this remote corner of Donegal. The Slieve Cumulacally route meanders around the Glencomakelly Peninsula, wandering around southern Donegal's unspoiled coastal and mountainous landscapes, including the dramatic Glengesh Valley, voted one of the most scenic routes in Europe. Do keep in mind that some of this route is on rural roads while other stretches are pathless mountainous terrain, therefore perhaps better explored with a local walking guide. Slieve League, the Pilgrim's Path, County Donegal. Also in Donegal, nearby is the ancient Pilgrim's Path that winds up the back of the Slieve League cliffs. While not associated with a specific saint or as old as many others on this list, the Pilgrim's Path is a beautiful and little-known pilgrimage way perfect for beginners. The Pilgrim's Path leads to the ruins of a mass rock and ruined chapel where illicit Catholic masses were held during Ireland's penal laws of the 17th and 18th century, when Catholic worship was outlawed by the ruling English. The trail also offers impressive views over the massive Slieve League cliffs, 3 times the height of the cliffs of Moher, the cliffs of Moher, dead ending at the top of the cliffs. And the best part is that you'll get the cliff top windy panorama all to yourself. For those who want to continue onwards, there is an option to walk along One Man's Pass, a knife-like ridge that drops off on either side that continues down along the Slieve League cliffs to the Bonglis viewpoint. Crosan na Neomha, or the Saint's Way, Dingle Peninsula, County Derry. The Dingle Peninsula is a region dotted with Christian and pre-Christian monuments. One way to discover it is by hiking the Crosan na Neomh, otherwise known as the Saints' Road, a medieval Irish pilgrimage path. It is one of Ireland's oldest. Along the way, marvel at ancient sites such as an early medieval oratory, old stone crosses, not to mention beautiful panoramas of Dingle's hills and coastline. The Saints' Way route finishes up in the shadow of the imposing Mount Brendan. Named for St. Brendan the Navigator, it is said that St. Brendan has a vision of the promised at the summit of Mount Brendan. Legend has it that he and his monks disembarked in the promised land, supposedly America, in 535 AD, over 900 years before Columbus. Keep reading for more about St. Brendan has a separate pilgrimage route. Mount Brandon, Dingle Peninsula, County Kerry. At the heart of Kerry's Dingle Peninsula and at the end of the Saints' Road, Crosan na Neomh, is the majestic Mount Brandon, named after St. Brendan, Briannian, the navigator. There is a spectacular pilgrimage trail that takes you to the summit of the mountain rising out of the Dingle Peninsula. According to myth, St. Brendan had a vision of a promised land while seated at Mount Brandon's summit. Inspired by his heaven-like vision, St. Brendan set sail in search of this mystical land, disembarking on American soil in 535 AD, over 900 years before Columbus. Though we may never be able to prove it for sure, there are many who believe that the Irish discovered America. St. Finbarr's Way, County Cork. The rambling landscapes of West Cork are pocketed with overlooked jewels. Crossing 3 mountain ranges and 4 valleys, St. Finbarr's Way is a journey into one of southwest Ireland's forgotten corners, taking in views over Bantry Bay and the West Cork coastline. The hike culminates at the ancient monastic settlement, now a quaint regional park of Guayuganbarra. It was here in the 6th century on an island in the middle of the lake that St. Finbarr built his monastery. The best way to hike St. Finbarr's Way is to break it into 2 sections. The first from the village to Drimoleague to Cailkill, and the second from there all the way to Gaoganbarra Forest Park and the wee monastery on the lake. The walk begins at the top of the rock where local tradition states that St. Finbarr in the 6th century admonished the people to return to Christ, then went on his way to Gaoganbarra. Ever since, St. Finbarr's Way has remained a popular local pilgrimage, though it's not well known internationally. And the last one is Mam Ayan, County Galway, Connemara, or Connemara. Winding through the Connemara wilds, Mam Ayan is a pilgrimage walk that leads to a tiny stone chapel. In fact, this chapel is even smaller than Carrack on Shannon's infamously tiny Costello Chapel, often called Ireland's smallest. At the chapel, find a cave-like recess that is today called St. Patrick's Bed. Overlooking the path and chapel, there is a statue of St. Patrick. And by the way, I have St. Patrick has the thumbnail or avatar of this stream. Dressed as a shepherd, sheep and all, overlooking path. Mam Ayan, or the Pass of the Birds, is a lovely pass through the mountainous Connemara landscape. The bogs, petering out on either side of the trail, leading off to craggy peaks, provide a beautiful, a bit wild atmosphere. As you hike through this rugged landscape, dotted along the trail, you'll find the Stations of the Cross spread along the trail, a homage to Mam Ayan's spiritual nature. Mam Ayan is relatively flat, but in the distance to the west, you'll see Connemara's famous 12 Bin Mountains, far less popular than Croagh Patrick. Mam Ayan's Pass is picturesque, tranquil, and spiritual, the perfect place for a pilgrimage walk. All right. So Ireland was forever changed as a result of the coming of Christianity. Ireland was forever changed by it. And in fact, the island of Ireland was the first land outside of the administration of the Roman Empire to be converted to Roman Catholicism. The first place to accept the Western Church that was never under formal Roman administration. And they have even found like writing from either the late 6th or early 7th century of Gaelic. Not Ogham script, but written down Latin and Gaelic. That is like 100 years before Anglo-Saxon became a written language. Anglo-Saxon was not written down except perhaps on some Saxon runes, which are kind of somewhat similar to Gothic runes. But aside from that, when all this was going on in Ireland, these massive monasteries and all of this preservation of Greek and Latin, and I think even Hebrew writing, the compelling composition of illuminated manuscripts like the Book of Kells, and all of this beautiful, elaborated manuscripts and stuff. In England, the Anglo-Saxons lived in rectangular houses, ate in mass halls, were still worshiping Anglo-Saxon gods, and basically lived like Vikings. They had no written language. They had not yet been Christianized. They were still pagan. This was in the mid-6th century, when already an Irish saint was in Rome, in the city of Rome, and was part of a group of monks, Augustinian monks, in the circle of Pope Gregory the Great, before England was even remotely reconverted to Christianity. Think about that. A lot of Irish monks also worked to revive the parish models and parish schools in the Frankish Empire under Emperor Charlemagne, when Charlemagne began the first large-scale revival of literature and learning in Europe in the Dark Ages. It's called the Carolingian Renaissance. A lot of Irish and Scottish monks also converted Scandinavia and Germany to Christianity. And I think even later they converted Poland to Christianity as well. So the contributions and works of the Irish monasteries and monks in this golden age before the Viking onslaught is really incredible. And of course, I said that I was going to talk about the Vikings, but I'm going to leave that for a later stream. I did this primarily for people that really enjoyed my first series on life in ancient Celtic times. So this was kind of a continuation to that. All right, we're done. Forge gang! I am still a hard man! Hope you enjoyed it. Code of Truth says, Forge gang! Oh, by the way, Code of Truth, did you want to play some Victoria 2? Did you want to play some Hearts of Iron 4 or Victoria 2? Let me know. Code of Truth says, Celt power! All right. I don't know who you are. You sound like your name is Zeu, or whatever. Zeu says, hello, foreigner, and the same person of the same song. I am from Russia. Slava Russia. Glory to white Europe and Europe itself. Europe will win. I am using a translator. Awesome, dude. Yeah, I can't really make any political stuff in the chat or on the stream, but yeah, what's up, man? Krail says '07. What's up, Krail? How are you doing, brother? Zainu has exclamation marks. Zalupa Pizdek Nahoy Buliat. And I can't read that. You sound actually, that sounds like more Ukrainian than Russian. I'm not for sure. So, yeah. Anyways, is there any more questions in chat? So, I hopefully I covered enough information about the lives of the Irish saints, but I don't want to go too overboard. The stream is over with, so thank y'all for watching. Have an awesome day. Peace out. This has been